Thanks for joining us. We are going to make a start on the EYFS Reforms webinar. So welcome, thanks for joining us. My name is Ellie Francis. I'm from the Early Childhood Unit at the National Children's Bureau. I'm one of the Assistant Directors here. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what you can expect from today. I'm going to give you a very brief introduction to the National Children's Bureau and the Foundation Years Programme before we move on to the main presentation, which is from Henna Jawaid at the Department for Education. Henna is the EYFS Reform Team Leader, and she is going to give us a presentation about the consultation and the reforms, and you will have an opportunity for questions after that. The plan is to then move to Hannah Piggott, a senior researcher at NatCen, who's going to tell us about the EYFS pilot evaluation, which NatCen undertook, to have a presentation from her, and then again to questions. Just to let you know, poor Hannah from NatCen is struggling with IT at the moment. She's not online as yet, but we have a bit of time to get her online. So we hope that by the time we come round to Hannah's NatCen presentation, we have sorted that out. Okay, so this consultation is open till the end of the month, and this webinar is your opportunity to listen to DFE, to hear about the reforms, and to help you to give a considered response in your consultation to the reforms. We are giving you the opportunity to ask questions so that you can then form your views on the consultation document, and we'll also be taking brief constructive comments because we are in the consultation period. I just want to let you know, if you haven't done a webinar before, that the way to ask questions, you should have a sidebar on your right. You can see there's a section there which says questions. If you click on that and you type in, then you will be able to get your questions over to us. So it's quite simple. Like I said, there's going to be a high number of you listening to the webinar today. We may not be able to put all of your questions to Henna or Hannah. We will try to theme them. We will try to ensure that the theme of your question is covered. And also just to reassure you that any questions that are unanswered, any comments we haven't been able to put, they will be emailed later over to the Department for Education. So if you get your questions to us now, I'm just going to give you a brief overview. So NCB has been around for over 50 years now. We work with education, health and social care professionals, and our role is to unite professionals to work towards a better childhood for all children. And this Foundation Years contract that we hold with the Department for Education is very exciting for us because it allows us to do that. So it allows us to work with the early years workforce and early years practitioners, and as we are doing today in this webinar, to hopefully increase knowledge and understanding today in this case around the EYFS reforms. And of course, equipping the workforce means we hope improving their confidence, and we hope to improve your confidence today to be able to get back your views on the EYFS reforms to the Department for Education. And one of the third point there, one of our aims from the Foundation Years contract is to facilitate a healthy debate between the Department for Education and the sector. And of course, if you are able to click on that questions section of the webinar sidebar today, then that is your opportunity to contribute to that debate with the Department for Education. So by being part of this webinar today, you're part of the Foundation Years community. Our Foundation Years website has over 57,000 individual users per month. You probably heard about this webinar through the Foundation Years mailing list or the news flashes. 27,000 people nationally get that newsletter. We hold these webinars throughout the year on relevant topics, and we also hold the regional Learn, Explore, Debate events. And there are some events, LED events taking place actually beginning next week. So if you hang around to the end of this webinar, I'll tell you a bit more about the next webinar we have planned and about those regional LED events. Do start, if you already know what your question's going to be, because you already know a lot about the reforms and you've been reading up, you can start to send questions through now if you wish. That's my part. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Henna. Henna is going to take you through the EYFS reforms. So over to you, Henna.
Thank you very much, Ellie. I hope everyone can hear me. It's an absolute delight to join you today. I'm so glad we've got great numbers listening into this webinar, and thank you so much to NCB for putting this on. Very grateful for the time they've taken to organise this and the regional LED events, as Ellie mentioned, which will be taking place over the next few weeks. This is a great opportunity to hear what you think. The consultation is live at the moment. It closes on the 31st of January. So I hope that you will field some really interesting questions and comments. A little bit about me. So I've been in the EYFS team for about 3 years now, and team leader for the EYFS reforms for about 2.5 years. I passionately believe in these reforms in terms of what we're doing. I know ministers are really passionate and keen to ensure that we achieve the right outcomes for all children by the time they leave reception year, and that we are also reducing workload and allowing and empowering the workforce to get on with what they do best, which is supporting children in settings and classrooms. Moving on to the first slide of our presentation. Sorry, am I just I've moved way ahead. Let me just go back.
You're in control of the slides now, Henna. So it's over to you with the slide control. Great.
I am. It's the mouse was going a little bit crazy. Right. Right. Okay, I know where I am now. Sorry, I'm seeing double mouse. Okay, double. Okay, cursor. Right, brilliant. Sorry about that. So just to give you a little bit of context and update, so just taking you a little bit back on this journey. Our reforms were announced in June 2018, but some of you may recall even before then, in September 2017, we put out in the primary assessment consultation response the kinds of reforms that we were going to undertake with the EYFSP. So that culminated in us working up revised early learning goals, which were about making the early learning goals much more clearer and strengthening language and vocabulary development to help close the word gap, to strengthen literacy and numeracy outcomes at the end of reception year and better prepare children for Key Stage 1, and base the ELGs, which are a narrow end of reception year outcome measure that base this on the predictors of future attainment. And importantly, as I've mentioned before, this is also about reducing workload, so ensuring that teachers have got the support and the equipment to ensure that they're making accurate judgments in terms of the EYFSP. And in doing that, we've also streamlined the assessment guidance. So we have just, for the pilot schools, we released an EYFSP handbook, a much more streamlined, succinct version, really stressing the point of teachers being able to use their own professional judgment in making assessments and not relying on unnecessary recording of evidence. And also making it very clear that the ELGs are not the curriculum. I can't stress that enough, that they are not the curriculum, even though they are used as such. They should not be. They are the endpoint metric that we use to ensure that children are reaching expected levels by the end of reception year. So in June 2018, we launched revised early learning goals and new assessment support, and that was piloted by 24 schools. The EEF and NatCen took forward the evaluation of that pilot, and that closed in the summer of last year. On the back of that pilot, we launched a full public consultation on the proposals, which I'll get into a little bit later. And we're still on course in implementing statutory rollout of our reforms in academic year 2021-22, with the option for schools, if they want to implement the reforms a year early, so that would be September of this year. Right, moving on. So just a very quick recap. I'm not going to go into great detail because I'm sure all of you know all of this, but I just thought a very, very brief, quick recap. We all know that the EYFS statutory framework is mandatory. It's about the learning and development and assessment requirements and safeguarding and welfare requirements for all settings to support children from birth to age 5. The previous kind of major reform was done following the Tickell report in 2012, where there was quite a significant change in terms of the number of early learning goals, and new elements were introduced, for instance, like the characteristics of effective teaching and learning. And there were previously 6 areas of learning, and now, as you know, we have 7. We should all know what the sections are of the EYFS framework, and just to kind of point that we did make this explicit in the consultation document that went out in October, that, you know, we don't prescribe to a particular teaching approach. We think Ofsted's definition of teaching is probably the best kind of definition that we can offer. You know, it's about a balanced approach, a rounded approach to teaching. So moving on to the next slide. So just in terms of our consultation, so our consultation went live in October the 24th. It closes on the 31st of January. We've set out some key proposals within that. I just wanted to make it very clear what's out of scope and in scope. So out of scope is the prime and specific areas of learning. That is remaining exactly the same. We put the same significance on the prime areas of learning as the bedrock for the specific areas of learning and all areas of learning, and they are interconnected and complement one another. The characteristics of effective teaching and learning are staying the same. They are central to the EYFS in making sure that ensuring that practitioners and teachers deliver effective practice. The good level of development metric is staying as it is, no change there. That is the composite measure of the the ELGs under the 3 prime areas, and maths and literacy in the specific areas. And this consultation is not about the progress check at age 2, and it is not about the reception baseline assessment. So what's in scope? So in scope are the educational programs. That's the summaries that you will find in the EYFS framework. We've attempted to make them more detailed with more of a focus on communication and language, again, as the key kind of area that of learning that underpins all areas of learning and is vitally important if we are to close the word gap. We've revised all 17 early learning goals to make them more specific and clear and easier to assess. Again, with a really strong communication and language and vocabulary development element running all the way through. We're proposing some changes on moderation, and we would really like views in terms of actually, we have proposed that we will scrap LA moderation, but that is for consultation. If it's not the right thing to do, we really want to know, views and feedback about what is the best approach to make moderation work for teachers in a way that is still allowing them to make credible and valid assessments, but also aims to kind of reduce the workload burdens that can so often go hand in hand with moderation. And the exceeded judgment, we propose to remove the exceeded judgment criteria, and you'll see in the consultation document why we have proposed this. It's so that teachers can really focus on getting their children to expected levels. We know there is still a significant gap, particularly between FSM children and the rest when we look at EYFSP data. So we feel that removing the exceeded judgment helps to focus on those children, but also reduces unnecessary workload that can sometimes be bought with having an extra judgment band. We've also included one element in the safeguarding and welfare, which is the promotion of oral health, to be included in the part of the wider safeguarding health and safeguarding and welfare section of the EYFS framework. But please do note that this is not about introducing mandatory toothbrushing supervision. That's not what this is at all. Excellent. So let's move on. So changes to the learning and development. Ellie, please do tell me if I'm going over my time. So changes to learning and development. So part of the key part of the consultation proposals is obviously the proposed revisions to the educational programs. I've just mentioned those. We just wanted to add some more detail into those summaries about the kinds of activities that practitioners and reception teachers can be doing with children on a daily basis. They are still fairly high level. We fully expect the workforce and professionals to be delivering and planning their curriculums in terms of what they see best in terms of their own settings and classrooms. And I will be coming on to the update of the development matters, which will be curriculum guidance, non-statutory curriculum guidance, but I'll come on to that a little bit later. And then the proposed revisions to the early learning goals. I said earlier, this is about adding clarity and specificity to the descriptors. So we have put extra focus on oral language and vocabulary acquisition. As I said, the evidence is clear about the importance of children expanding the breadth and depth of this so that they are ready for all areas of learning as they enter school and beyond. PSED, we've introduced a new ELG on self-regulation and included descriptors on self-care in here as well, under managing self. Self-regulation, as we know, is an increasingly important element of learning that both facilitates non-cognitive and cognitive learning. And we've introduced both the executive function and self-regulation. So it's about children being able to be attentive, but also to be aware of their feelings and emotions and be able to regulate those. Physical development, we felt strongly about separating gross and fine motor skills so that we can really focus in on those. in their separate elements. Literacy, we've introduced a new ELG in comprehension. We think this is important because literacy shouldn't just be about writing and word reading. It is about a child being able to understand what they're hearing through stories and books. And in maths, we have focused on children being able to understand the depth of number and understanding quantities. And we continue to stress that shape, space, and measure should still absolutely be the focus of teaching and learning throughout reception year and pre-reception. It's included in the educational program, which is in the EYFS framework as a proposal. It is just that we want the focus to be on children attaining a really strong grasp of number, which is the bedrock for all other maths and numeracy areas. We really want children to be able to grasp and focus in on that as the end metric for reception year. In understanding the world, we've kind of defined more clearly understanding the world elements under science, history and geography, and we've removed IT and expressive arts and design. Again, we've made the descriptors more clearer and stressed the importance of children being creative in the space of, stories and nursery rhymes and facilitating that oral language and vocabulary development. I won't go into detail on what I've said because I've probably already mentioned it on the right-hand side of the slides, but as I said, our key focus is improving outcomes and making the ELGs more specific and clear, particularly to help with assessment purposes and to reduce teacher workload, so professionals are allowed and enabled and supported and encouraged to use their own professional judgment and not gather unnecessary evidence which takes them away from supporting children. Moving on to the next slide. Sorry, I've just had a weird pop-up on my computer. Right, moving on. Yeah, so the new non-statutory curriculum guidance, which is an update of development matters. I'll just say something briefly about this. Julian Grenier is leading the work with us. Again, our kind of key aims for this is to improve outcomes and to strengthen teaching practice from birth all the way to 5, and to be able to support teachers in being able to plan their curriculums and strengthen, as I said, strengthen teaching practice. It is in line with social mobility ambitions to narrow disadvantage gaps. We know good curriculum facilitates this. I've already mentioned reducing workload burdens, and for the first time we want to introduce specific reception year guidance, as we think this will really benefit and support reception teachers in terms of their teaching and practice during reception year in order to get children to those goals. Moving on. So the final slide, supporting workforce implementation. So once the consultation closes at the end of the month, we'll obviously be analysing the responses and ministers will be making a final decision on the proposals. And then we, as I said, we have plans for early adoption of the reforms in September 2020. Alongside this, we are going to be developing new exemplification guidance for the new ELGs. We're looking to how we can do this in a way that again facilitates teachers being able to make be able to judge and make consistent judgments in terms of what the ELG expected standard looks like. I've already mentioned the non-statutory curriculum guidance in the slide before. And as I said, we want to ensure that we have fully prepped our early adopter schools and local authorities, and in time for statutory rollout for everyone else. We will be doing all we can to support and facilitate that preparation so that everyone is fully prepared and know why the changes have been made and the rationale behind them. I think that's it.
Hi there, Henna. Thank you. Okay, so you've covered your slides. We'd like to move to questions. We'll have about 5 minutes of questions now, and then we will move to NatCen. Just to advise the audience and also to advise Henna that while she's been speaking, we have been trying to get Hannah from NatCen onto the webinar in the usual format, and I think her IT is not allowing her to. We did do a run through, but you know what IT is like. So how we're going to attempt to get Hannah on as part of the webinar is that Hannah will be phoning in, and we hope that you will be able to hear her in that way. The sound may not be as good as if she was actually kind of linked in through the webinar. So just to let you know that, and if the sound's really bad, we will stop doing it that way, and we will switch to Henna presenting that part. But we're going to give it a try with Hannah on the phone first. It might sound strange because Hannah won't be able to control her slides, so she'll be telling us when to switch from slide to slide. So just to update the audience that that's what we're planning to do in a few minutes after some questions, and just to update you too, Henna. Okay, so we have had lots of questions in. We're going to take about 5 minutes of questions now. I think we've had a very few questions that are about anything other than the educational programs and the early learning goals. So most of them around the early learning goals. So I'll go straight to some questions regarding that. So this question is from Nathan Archer. Henna, just checking you can hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. So this question is from Nathan Archer. So it's about the breadth of the curriculum. So if teachers are teaching to the ELGs, what is DfE planning to do to ensure the breadth of the curriculum in schools or settings? So, for example, with the removal of shape, space, and measure, how will DfE kind of be ensuring that this is still taught?
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that question. It's a very, very valid question. So just to emphasize again, we still fully expect shapes, space, and measure to be taught as part of a rounded, rich curriculum, both in pre-reception settings and in reception year. We've only taken it out as an ELG because we know from the evidence that number is the strongest predictor of later outcomes in maths. And I don't say this lightly. You know, when in the 2.5 years that I've been working on this, I've had several people, several teachers from early years, Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4, coming to me and saying, please focus on children being able to have a strong grasp of number in the early years by the end of reception year, because we still get kids in Key Stage 1, 2, 3, and 4 that still aren't confident in maths and basic number in terms of cardinality and ordinality. So this is why the ELG, which I again stress is a narrow endpoint measure, it's not the curriculum. This is why we have focused on number. We still fully expect shape, space, and measure. It's in the educational, the proposed educational program for maths. You'll see that in the consultation, and we fully expect it to feature in the new curriculum guidance.
Okay, thank you, Henna. Okay, although that wasn't specifically just about shape, space, and measure, it did touch on it. So I'm going to ask a question from Elaine Bennett, which is about the maths ELG. just asking you to elaborate a bit more on the thinking behind the statement, numbers are the bedrock of all future maths learning, and what's some of the kind of research that has gone into that proposed reform?
Again, I go back to the response I gave to the previous question. Over the last 2.5 years, we've worked with a variety of experts and academics, early years academics and experts in maths. And we know that a focus on number, and I've just mentioned that you know, if we want children to have a really confident handle on number and be able to go on and do all kinds of maths, whether that is space shapes and measure later on geometry, you know, children need to have a strong grasp of their understanding of number and quantities, and that is the rationale and reasoning behind that.
Okay, thanks, Henna. This is a general one. It's from Daniel Mayer. He's phrased it as a question. You may wish to take it as a comment that you want to kind of take back. But his query is around your statements around making, bringing the EYFS more in line with Key Stage 1, and saying kind of what's the thinking around that? Why are we aligning EYFS more in stage with Key Stage 1 rather than vice versa?
Thank you very much for that question. So this is about reception year. We know that you know, reception year can be very varied in terms of the expectations and the quality of teaching, and you know, reception year is the foundation. Well, the last critical year before all children begin school proper, as in year 1. So it's really important that we ensure that all children are prepared for the learning that will take place in year 1, and this is, you know, this is what we have heard from all sorts of practitioners and teachers in the sector over the last 2.5 years or so, that it's really important that we ensure that all children are fully prepared for the learning that takes place in year 1. I don't have the I don't have the control or the responsibility or any of those things to control what happens in Key Stage 1, and the curriculum, you know, that is there for year 1 and beyond. All I can do in my kind of capacity is to ensure that the work that we are kind of doing here is about ensuring that all kids are ready and prepared for year 1, and that is about strengthening the practice that occurs in reception year, ensuring that you know, we kind of focus on the right things for children by the end of reception year.
Great, Henna. Okay, I'm going to just, before we move to Hannah from NatCen, I'm just going to do one general question that's come through. It's from Helen Moylett. Helen's asking about the statement around this reducing workload, and how these reforms, in DfE's view, will reduce workload.
Thank you very much, Helen, for that question. Yeah, so we're reducing workload. First of all, in terms of having clearer and specific early learning goals, I think, you know, that kind of does quite a lot in terms of actually teachers being able to take those early learning goals and to be able to understand what is required in terms of what children are able to demonstrate by the end of reception year, and it sets, you know, it should set teachers up in terms of what they then need to teach, and hopefully the curriculum guidance that we're planning to launch this spring as well will facilitate that. And the major ways that we are hoping and aiming to reduce workload is through the assessment process itself. That is why we've kind of reduced the guidance material, so we have one streamlined EYFSP handbook. We've stressed the importance of teachers not recording unnecessary evidence and collecting unnecessary paperwork and loads of photographs and all that kind of stuff. They should be absolutely feel empowered and confident to use their own judgment. That's what we want. And that's why, again, we're also looking at moderation, how we can ensure that moderation works in terms of, as I said before, enabling valid and credible assessments, but also frees up teachers and doesn't take up unnecessary time in terms of processes. And I think we've seen the evidence of our new proposals in the evaluation of the pilot that was conducted by NatCen and the EEF, where you know, there were some very, very positive, significantly positive remarks about teachers already experiencing a reduction in workload in terms of the new proposals.
Okay, thank you, Henna. Thank you, Henna.
Okay, will do. So firstly, I'd just like to kind of say hello to everyone. I'm not sure if Ellie has already introduced me, but my name is Hannah Piggott and I'm a senior researcher at NatCen. So we are the National Centre for Social Research. So today I'm going to be talking to you about the evaluation of the early years foundation stage profile reform pilot that we conducted. Before I get started, I'd just like to thank DFE for involving us in this study. It was a really interesting piece of work. And also to thank the pilot schools who were involved. They were really helpful throughout the study, which made our job a lot easier. Okay, so moving to the next slide, which talks about what we will cover.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about how some of the pilot schools understood the revised ELGs, and then also about how the revised ELGs were put into practice by practitioners. So just moving to the next slide.
Yeah.
So the first section is going to be about the understanding of the ELGs. So again, on to the next slide.
Yeah.
So overall understanding is what I'm going to talk about first. So practitioners reported that the revised ELGs were easy to use. However, as you can see from those two quotes, there were some contradictory views about whether they were either too adult-led or more child-centred. So one view was that they involved more formal learning than the previous ELGs, and that meant they were more adult-led. The alternative view was actually that they involved child-led role play, enabled a focus on stories, group work and discussion, and therefore were more child-centred. In terms of the structure and style, practitioners reported finding them precise and clear, and that they really liked the bullet point format that had been introduced with these ELGs. So now I'm going to talk through a little bit, a couple of areas of learning, just to give you a flavour of the more detailed feedback that practitioners were giving on the ELGs. So I'll just go to the next slide, which is on the literacy area of learning.
Yeah, we're there, Hannah.
Brilliant. So practitioners really appreciated that this area of learning had been split into 3 ELGs, so that's comprehension, word reading and writing. And overall it was considered clear. However, there were a couple of areas of improvement suggested. So firstly, practitioners suggested they would appreciate greater clarity and maybe some exemplification for the writing ELG. There were also different views on whether this ELG was pitched at the right level. For instance, the focus on 10 diagraphs in word reading. One view was that this was too low an expectation for this age group. However, alternatively, there was another view among practitioners that it was too high an expectation. And this illustrates the point that some of the feedback around the revised ELGs relates to the ability of these ELGs to fit in well with other schemes and systems that practitioners were working within. So often this feedback related to phonic schemes that practitioners were using and how well this ELG fitted with those. Okay, just going to move to the next slide, which is on the mathematics area of learning. So in terms of the number ELG, that was viewed as clear and specific, and practitioners like to focus on the firm foundations, particularly around focusing on numbers 1 to 10. However, the flip side of this was that this ELG was felt maybe would not meet the expectations for year 1. The numerical patterns ELG, it was felt this linked well with the number ELG. However, practitioners reported that some aspects of it were felt to be subjective and hard to interpret. So, for instance, the phrase automatically recall, practitioners brought up issues around whether this needed a child to understand what they were recalling or if they could simply repeat it. There were also questions about how automatic the recall had to be. Was it immediate, or did a child have a couple of seconds to think about an issue? Okay, just moving on to the next area of learning, which is the physical development. So that's the next slide.
Yeah, we're with you.
Great. So practitioners reported appreciating the separation of this ELG into 2 distinct sets of skills. They felt that gross and fine motor skill actually are distinct from each other, and splitting them made it easier for them to make accurate assessments of these ELGs. In terms of the gross motor skill ELG, overall practitioners reported having a good understanding of this ELG. However, there were some small queries, for instance, moving energetically. How much accuracy was needed with this energetic movement? Did it also require coordination? In reference to the fine motor skills ELG, the main area of discussion here was the tripod grip. Some practitioners described using best fitting to take tripod grip to mean a comfortable grip. However, for practitioners who were more strict and felt children had to have specifically the tripod grip to be expected, there was some concern that perhaps this term was too rigid and that maybe terms such as effective or comfortable grip would be better. Okay, so that's kind of the end of the whistle-stop tour of some areas of learning. So just going to move to the next section now, which is on using the ELGs. So the first slide in that is on evidence gathering, which I'm going to talk about first. So DFE provided some additional guidance to pilot schools in the EYFS framework that they should not be collecting or recording unnecessary evidence, and they should instead be using their professional judgment to make assessments. There was some reluctance expressed to completely change practices around evidence collection, and reasons for still collecting evidence were given, such as accountability. So while the DFE had clearly shown that they would be okay with less evidence collection, practitioners expressed concern that their senior staff may not be okay with this. Practitioners also pointed out that some level of evidence collection was still important for them, for instance, as an aid memoir to help them assess a child or during moderation practices. However, overall, the reduction in evidence collection was viewed positively. Practitioners described feeling trusted and valued, and the fact that they could collect less evidence freed up their time to work with children and actually to develop stronger relationships, which enabled them to create more accurate assessments of those children. Okay, I'm just going to move to the next slide now, which is on accuracy of assessments. So overall, practitioners reported that they found these ELGs easier to assess. They were clearer, and in particular, the bullet point system was helpful. There were also specific ELGs which they felt improved assessments. For instance, the literacy ELGs around were helpful when trying to assess children who had English as an additional language, because they felt it allowed them to make more accurate assessments because word reading and comprehension had been split. However, practitioners raised that there were some areas where greater clarity was needed around the wording of ELGs. There was also some concern about the variation between schools due to lack of supporting materials. So while practitioners felt that within school they could make accurate assessments, there was a concern that without exemplification materials, for instance, the judgment call that their school was making might be different from the judgment call a different school would make. Okay, I'm just going to the next slide now. So this is on best fit judgments. So while the bullet point format was viewed positively by practitioners, it did create a variation in approach for how to best fit around the new ELGs. One approach was to look at the 3 bullet points, best fit each bullet point, and then take an average across all of them. A second approach was to take the ELG as a whole, use the bullet points as kind of a helpful structure, but to view the ELG as a whole when best fitting. Generally, practitioners expressed comfort with best fitting, and this was a practice they were used to. However, a couple of concerns were mentioned. For instance, it was considered hard to best fit when practitioners weren't completely sure what exceeding would look like, and they suggested exemplification materials might address this issue. Okay, I'm just moving on to the next slide now, which is on readiness for Key Stage 1.
Okay.
So practitioners spoke about the revised ELGs in some areas better matching the Year 1 curriculum, which they felt helped the readiness for Key Stage 1. They also mentioned the basic skills, which were focused on in these revised ELGs, providing a firmer foundation for moving to Year 1. However, a key concern expressed was that schools might not teach aspects that have been taken out of the revised ELGs. However, no school said that they themselves had not taught one of these areas that were missing, for instance, shape, space and measure. However, they did acknowledge that perhaps because of the change in the ELG, they gave it less attention than previously and covered it in slightly less depth. Okay, so just moving to the next slide now. So that's sort of the kind of whistle-stop tour we've done, but I'm going to give you a few concluding thoughts. So again, to the next slide, which is titled Overall. Yes, okay. So practitioners expressed that clarity was needed in some areas of the ELGs, and there were some aspects of content that were queried, for instance, the tripod grip. And there was also a strong feeling that the ELGs were not sufficient without supporting materials. So that would be exemplification materials, criteria for exceeding, and also a revised version of development matters. However, overall, at the pilot schools, practitioners have accepted the new ELGs and taken them in their stride, and they expressed that they felt they had increased clarity and ease of use from the previous ELGs. Okay, well that's the end of the presentation. I'm aware that's quite kind of a speedy summary. Our report is available, so if you want more detail, take a look at that. We've also put myself and Fatima, who is the head researcher on the project's emails there, so if you want to get in touch with us, please do. We'd be happy to answer questions about the research.
Brilliant, thank you, Hannah. And I think we managed to keep up with you in the slides, and we can see there your email addresses and things like that. We have had some questions through, which are a lot of the questions I think will still be ones that we will go back to Henna for, but we have had some questions through that you may be able to answer about the pilot and the evaluation. You briefly touched on feedback about the need for the supporting materials and the revised development matters. Di Childers asked if you could give a bit more detail on what practitioners were saying about development matters and what they need from that.
So I think from the interviews, what we were picking up was that development matters in combination with the ELGs were used by practitioners to track children as they kind of came into reception and then track their progress towards achieving the ELG. So without a revised version of development matters, practitioners found it really hard to know how the child was going to get from the point they came in at reception at to that kind of expected grade at the ELG, and whether they were on progress, on track to achieve that.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that. Was there from the evaluation, was there much feedback about how this would work with children with SEND, Hannah? And I can also put this query about SEND to Henna as well, but was there anything that came out from the evaluation, Hannah?
Yes. So this was spoken about by the practitioners in the evaluation, and it was an issue that they were aware of and kind of alive to. I think in some areas, some criticisms that were made or concerns were perhaps not necessarily new to the revised ELGs. So a lot of the concerns about whether these children would be able to achieve expected, it seems to kind of weren't new to the revised ELGs. So I think some of it was a problem with the ELGs as a whole, or not new at least. There was some concern around the new ELG around self-regulation and how to properly assess children who have SEND on that, whether they, how much support they could have from their teachers, and whether that would mean they could achieve expected. There was also, as I spoke about briefly, some comments on children with English as a second language. So I know that's slightly different from SEND. But while they thought the split of word reading and comprehension made assessment easier, there was some concern about whether these children would be able to achieve a good level of development on the speaking ELG.
Okay.
So those are the kind of headlines from the top of my head from the evaluation.
Okay, and maybe we can speak to Henna about that briefly as well. Okay, I think now is the time to bring, possibly bring Henna in. I'm not sure. We're going to give it a go to have myself, Henna and Hannah all speaking at the same time, but we're not sure because of this unconventional way we've got Hannah joining us, whether it will work. But we are going to give it a try now. So 1 second now. I think, Henna, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay, we might, there may be some feedback happening, and we would appreciate any comments in from the audience to let us know whether this is working and whether the sound is okay. It seems to be at the moment, so we're going to continue. Okay, so we are running, we have got less time for questions because of the IT issues that we've had, but we can definitely go for about another 7 minutes or so with some questions, I think. Let's see, we've got some questions regarding, I'm going to go to something different. We had a question regarding the oral health section of the consultation. This was from Claudia at the Infant and Toddler Forum. It came in, I think, in advance. So what will be the strategies to support this element further? And that's to Henna.
Sorry, I got a bit of feedback.
Okay.
It kind of cut out. Sorry, could you repeat that? Sorry.
Of course, Henna, and sorry, and we will try one more time. If it doesn't seem like it's working, we will go to just having Henna for questions. But the question was regarding the oral health section of the reforms, and Claudia at the Infant and Toddler Forum has asked whether there'll be any strategies put in place to support that further.
Healthy eating strategy, is that right?
But the oral health section.
Okay, so I'll try and answer that the best I can in terms of how I've understood it. We still include healthy eating as part of the proposed ELG on managing self. So that's definitely there, and as you know, there is a wider health section currently, and will always be in the EYFS framework in the safeguarding and welfare section. That's section 3 of the EYFS framework. It's very much up to individual settings and schools to kind of think about, you know, how they include healthy eating and wider health as part of a rich curriculum within their own setting. That's very much up to each individual setting to decide how they then take that forward. As I said, we have got new development matters, new curriculum guidance being developed, and that will include elements of health and healthy eating. But as I said, it is up to individual settings to ensure that they are providing what they can in terms of a curriculum.
Okay, thank you, Henna. This one is from Helen Moylett again. So the educational programme summarises the sort of activities that promote development, but there's no mention of play, which is obviously fundamental. Can you talk a bit more, Henna, about play within the revised EYFS reforms?
You know, play. This is in the EYFS framework. It's clearly set out. You know, DfE government doesn't prescribe specific aspects of pedagogy or practice. You know, the educational programs are there as high-level summaries of the kinds of activities that practitioners and teachers should take forward. You know, that fully includes delivering a rich curriculum through play and all other types of learning. We have expressed this clearly throughout the proposed educational program summaries. But you know, it is up to, again, I stress this, it is up to each setting and, you know, reception class to kind of think about how they take forward their own pedagogy and practice in terms of bringing their curriculum to life. But we absolutely you know, express in the EYFS framework, as it's always been, that a balanced pedagogy is the best way forward, which includes lots of play.
Thanks, Henna, and we completely agree. I'm trying to take a range of questions, so I'm moving about as they come in. This one is about physical development, and Joe Blank has said, why has dance gone in the curriculum? So is there any comments regarding that?
So I'm not quite sure. I wonder if is it Joe? Sorry, who's asked the question?
Joe,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Does Joe mean the ELGs, and that's what Joe is describing as the curriculum? Because we haven't removed any curriculum or changed any curriculum. We've revised the endpoint measure, which are the early learning goals. Dance should still form part of a healthy, rich curriculum. As always, no one's removing dance from anywhere. What we've set out in the proposed ELGs, as I've said, are the core elements that we expect all children to demonstrate by the end of reception.
Okay, so it's still in the curriculum, is your view. Okay, this is a PSED one, personal, social, and emotional development. So tell us a bit more about the research and the thinking behind the introduction of the self-regulation ELG, if that's possible. I know the self-regulation in PSED is something that's come up quite a lot with practitioners when I've been out and about. So is it possible to talk about that a little bit, Henna?
Yeah. Yeah, very briefly. So self-regulation, when we first went out during the primary assessment consultation back in 2017, it was one of the proposals we set out in the EYFSP section of the consultation document, and the responses to that were very significantly popular in terms of, yes, we should definitely have a ELG on self-regulation, and that is what we have now proposed in the proposals for the revisions to the ELGs that you see in the consultation document. We engaged with many early years experts, experts in self-regulation and wider PSED, to be able to develop the ELG, which we believe has struck the right balance between all elements of self-regulation, be that executive functioning or more of the emotional, social elements of self-regulation. As I said earlier, we have set out in the proposed changes that self-regulation goes hand in hand with communication and language, in terms of ensuring that children are best prepared for future learning.
Thank you. Right, these are two quite brief ones, I think, before we wrap up the questions. We understand that from this September, people might be able to opt in if they choose to be part of and use the revised EYFS. Is that correct, Henna?
Sorry, say again. I lost you a little bit.
I'm sorry, Henna. So
no.
I'm just thinking time frames. Is it true that people can opt in from this September and it's mandatory from September 21?
Yes, that's absolutely right. So we'll be offering the opportunity to all schools to voluntarily opt into the new reforms. And that's from this September, with statutory rollout the year after.
And will there be any opportunity for PVIs, not school-based settings, but other settings, to be part of the early rollout if they wish to be? Because I know they weren't part of the pilot, were they?
Yeah, that's a really good question. No, so the reason we've limited the early opt-in to schools is that it is schools, reception classes, that predominantly carry out the statutory assessment, the EYFSP, at the end of assessment, and most of the changes are to the EYFSP, that's the ELGs, assessment process, moderation, that all takes place in reception year, and so that's why we have limited it to schools for this instance.
Okay, that's good. That's good to be clear. Right, at this stage, I'm going to say thank you very much. I'm going to say goodbye to Hannah, who's been on the phone, and I'm going to apologise to her. I'm not sure whether it was our IT or your IT, Hannah, but we did some quick thinking on our feet, and we still managed to get you involved. So thanks very much. Thank you very much, Hannah, and we'll speak to you soon. And Henna too, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. It's been great. It's been great working with you. What we're going to do is, we were inundated, Henna, with questions. We haven't covered even a small percentage of the questions. I tried my best, even though I was severely under stress because of this IT issue. I tried my best to get you as broad a selection of questions as possible. But what we'll do is we will get all your, and this is to reassure the audience as well, we will get all questions and comments over to DFE. So I just wanted to say thank you, Henna, for bearing with us, and it's been great. And I'm just going to move now, say goodbye to Henna, and move on to just a few final things regarding the foundation year's contract. So thank you, Henna.
Thank you very much. Thank you, NCB, for organising this, and thank you so much for all the people who have joined this webinar today. I hope I answered all your questions as fully as I can, and please do go and respond to the consultation. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Henna. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so thanks for bearing with us. You saw that we really had to think on our feet there as a way to get Hannah to be part of the webinar today. So, and it did, I'm sure, I think it impacted on our ability to get through all of the questions, which is a pity, but thank you for bearing with us. I'm just going to finish today's webinar by just telling you a couple of things. We have a further webinar coming up. The next webinar is actually on reception baseline assessment. We haven't set a confirmed date. It's probably mid-February. So if you are linked into the Foundation Years community, if you get our newsletter and our news flashes, you will be advised about the dates for the baseline assessment webinar. and you'll be able to sign up, and I expect places on that webinar will go quickly, so do sign up quickly. We, as you may well be aware, have these Learn, Explore, Debate events happening nationally this month. They start next week. All the details available on the website. They have mostly sold out, but I just wanted to let you know that there's still plenty of tickets for Bristol if you're from that region and the southwest. And I believe a few tickets left for Birmingham. So if you are able to get to those localities, do come on over. It's an opportunity to hear more about the EYFS consultation from DfE, have an update from Ofsted on the new framework, and also to hear from Public Health England about the speech and language and communication pathway. And as you can see from the slide, the Foundation Years website was recently refreshed. We hope it's now more accessible, so if you haven't looked at the website recently, please do so. And please do encourage your colleagues to sign up to the newsletter. You will get these news flashes, and people will be able to take part in these, what we hope are useful webinars. That's the end of our presentation. One final word, that's how you find your way to the Foundation Years website. We want to take some time to say thank you for your contributions, thank you for taking part. It's been a pleasure to be with you this evening. And if you have any specific things you would like to let us know, there is an email address there for your questions or comments. These slides and this webinar will be available through the Foundation Years website, so you can look at it again and peruse it and listen to it again. Tomorrow, they'll be uploaded at some point tomorrow, so you can have a look at them again. So just to say thank you from myself, Ellie at National Children's Bureau, and I hope you have a good evening. Thanks, goodbye.